gallery, Simona and Jure also for inviting me and doing all the work. I will start very briefly, tell you about my background. I was born in Damascus. Is the sound okay? I learned photography at my father's shop. My father was a photographer for 30 years. He did sort of portrait, commercial, weddings, all this kind of photographies. And then in 1976, 77, he opened the first color lab in Sirija, and he named it Dream Color. So they used to develop 2,000 films a day, and it was a very big business. And basically, my summer holidays were in the lab until I finished high school, and then I took over for 12 years and run the business. And until I reached a moment, then there was no higher steps in the business. I decided, because I always wanted to be a photographer, and I left the lab and focused on becoming an artist. So this is actually the studio in the lab, and this is my father when he was 30s. I am Syrian, I have Armenian origins, also similar issues like Nina said. So my work pretty much is about also the being Armenian and how dealing with the genocide, which we constantly try not to forget. And also I work on social issues which in the region, either Syria or Egypt or Jordan or Turkey. So I will start with this project. It's called Execution Squares, and this is almost one of the earlier works I've done in 2008, where I photographed public execution squares in Syria, in 3 different cities: Damascus, Aleppo, and Latakia on the coast. And this is something that we inherited from the Ottomans, who were colonizing Syria for 400 years. So the Syrians governments, consequently, they inherited this way of punishment, and we continued until recently, where Syria became a bigger execution squares. What I did, the reason I did this project is because when I was 11 years old, on my way to school in the bus, it was 6:30 in the morning, I saw 3 hanged bodies on one of these squares, top naked, and they were covered with a piece of paper, like sheet paper, long until their knees, written on it their names, date of birth, and why they were convicted. Usually the Ottomans, when they did execute, they used the main public square in the city, which there were not so many at that time. But in the 90s in Damascus, especially, the crime rate really went up, and so the government changed the system, and they started to execute in the nearest square where the crime took place happened. So it was kind of a revenge to the family who live nearby, and also to show to the public that this is what happens to you if you commit a crime. And it was mainly criminals who committed rape or killing or stealing, this kind of, it was not political, because the political ones, we've never seen them, it was always hidden. So I saw these 3 hanged bodies, and they were open eyes, so it's like the eyesight, we kind of bumped into each other. And this image I never forget, I could never erase it from my memory. And so I was wondering how to erase this, and also wondering how do they react? Would they keep these images? Because what they did is they they install the platform for the lynching at 4:30 in the morning, and when the sun comes up, this is when the execution happens, and they leave the bodies hanging until 9:30, 10 in the morning, so everybody who's passing by would see. So for me, it's all, every time I pass by this particular square, I've seen these bodies hang. So I realized maybe with photography that might help me just to convince myself, looking at these photos, that they don't exist anymore. So that's why of course, I did this project, but eventually I failed because these bodies kept appearing to me every time I passed by. So this is in Aleppo, the main square. It's called Bab al-Faraj. Now it's destroyed. It's nearby the old city of Aleppo, where the covered market is. This is where I've seen my childhood. I've seen the three hanged bodies, and it's nearby our house and my father's shop. In 2013, 12-13, I did this exhibition called Work. It's called Unexposed. It's about Armenians who were forced to convert into Islam during the Armenian genocide in 1915. So these ones, until today, they are called the ones who fled the edge of the sword. Until today, they call them the converts, or donme in Turkish, which applies to the Armenians, and also it applies to the Jewish community who lived in Thessaloniki, and they converted into Islam 1600. And when there was this population exchange with Turkey in 1923 between Greece and Turkey, a lot of these donme, the convert Jews who went into Turkey, and they kept the the Turkish called them always the donme until today. Coming back to the Armenians, in 2007 there was an Armenian Turkish journalist. His name was Hrant Dink, who was he ran a newspaper, Armenian newspaper called Agos, which is still functions until today. He always tried to closer the ties with the Armenians and the Turkish, regardless the genocide, and open up also the hearts, let's say, to bring them closer. But in one of the cases, but he was always unwelcomed in the majority, like right-wing Turkish societies and the politicians. And until the day he brought documents saying that one of the 4 adopted daughters of Kemal Atatürk, who was the founder of Republic of Turkey, was actually Armenian. And her name is Sabha, which is the name of the airport. And Sabha was the first woman war pilot who bombed their sim, and there was 25,000 people who died. So Sabha, so Hrant Dink, he brought these documents to prove that she's an Armenian. And from here people started to wonder about, especially the ones who never knew anything or any history, stories about their grandfathers, grandmothers. So they started to wonder about their roots, and there's like a big number who they are finding out that actually they have Armenian roots, and that's why their grandparents or the grandma, they never told or talked about this issue because it was a taboo, especially the first generation who went through the Armenian genocide. And in 2007, Hrant was assassinated in front of his office. He was stabbed by a 17-year-old nationalist in front of his newspaper office. So there was a big march. So this movement started to become bigger and bigger, where people, especially in eastern Turkey, started to find their roots, and they want, they find their Armenian roots, and they go to Istanbul, to the Armenian church. They get baptized in the Armenian church, convert into Christianity, and they get an Armenian name. But all this stays in secrecy, because once they reveal that they converted from Islam into Christianity, of course, this is something will not be accepted by the Turkish society. So what I did, it took me 3 years to find people who converted, who went through this process in Istanbul, and I found someone whose name was Sadik, who was a communist, Kurdish, and who converted into Christianity just for the sake of reveal that actually he's an Armenian, and to get married to an Armenian woman and have a child, send him to the Armenian school, because if you're not Armenian, you're not allowed to send your children to Armenian school in Turkey. So from there, Sadek put me in touch with 9 other families who moved, all of them from eastern Turkey, and this is where the majority of the movement is happening. And the number is unknown, but most probably they say it's over 2 million people. I photographed these people in their houses, because for me it was the only place where they would feel comfortable and they feel themselves, and they could tell me their stories and the reasons they decided to convert. The next one is history with the missing H, and this was a project I did with Salt in Istanbul. It was in 2011, 10-11. When I was there doing research, I went to an exhibition that was organized by the city of Istanbul, the city hall, and so there was this timeline in the first thing you see once you enter the exhibition hall. It was, the timeline was started from 1400, when the Ottoman Empire was created, until 2010, and in each year there was an achievement happening, and it was mentioned what. So there was only 1 year was missing on this timeline, was the 1915, is when the Armenian genocide happened, and that was not mentioned. So I decided to do this project to photograph public libraries and national archive centers, where they keep documents and books about the Armenians, the history of the Armenians, and the documents relating to the genocide. So some of these places did not allow me to enter or to proceed with the project, because I have such an Armenian name that it was very clear, and they have their doubts. And some of the places they let me, but I was not allowed to touch any of the books. I was guarded, escorted with 2 guides. They always wanted to look what is inside the frame when I was taking pictures. And some of the places, like the National Archive Center, they did not allow me to go to the storage, where they keep actually all the documents about the Armenian genocide that was written by the Ottoman authorities. And we think that there are so many documents reveal the reasons, etc., about why the genocide happened. So instead he let me to go to the reading room, such as this one, where it's actually empty cupboards, empty shelves, empty tables. He just allowed me to photograph this place, which I accepted. So the reason for me is to photograph this also, it's just facing these books, the history, and also in combination with mine, because if they refuse the existence of the Armenians in Turkey, which means I actually don't exist, because my grandparents originally come from eastern Turkey. They went through the genocide and reached all the way to Sirija. this is the Bayezid. It's the first public library in Turkey. It's from 1600. This is one of the places that surprisingly they allowed me to enter, but I was not allowed to touch anything. But I could see on the books, because I read Arabic, I could see on the books written books about Armenians, because I could, when they say Armeni, it means Armenians. So I could read this on the side of the book. This is Topkapı. So the next one is called Zebiba, and Zebiba in Arabic means raisin. And the Zebiba in Egypt is the praying mark. It's called Zebiba because it has the same texture as the raisin on the forehead here. That's why they call it Zebiba. So this it happens because of praying 5 times a day, and because they play on plastic rugs and they scrub their head on the rug with quite a lot of force, and this stain appears. And this is very, very common in Egypt. I mean, once you walk on the streets, Cairo, you could see all different shapes of this kind of scar. And this was really very shocking for me because it's kind of creating this wall between me and them, or between the other people, the public, who don't pray as much as they do. It's just separating, and there is a message also saying that we are closer to God than you are. So that's why I photographed this. I was not interested in the faces because I usually don't photograph portraits of people, try to avoid. But in this case, it was mainly, my main intention was to show the stain, the scar. This can happen with, I mean, anyone can do it. Just once you put your forehead on the wall for 1 minute, and then you will have a black stain. But if you, it disappears again quite quickly. So what they do is they put lemon juice, or I don't know the other method to do with onions. So they scrub it, and because of the acidity, it just keeps this black stain forever. It never goes away. So these were the soft version. So what I did is I rented shops in the city of Cairo and installed a studio and asked people to come in. Few of them we told that we want to photograph the Islamic mark, which is not Islamic. This is not something religious. It's man-made thing. I mean, it's not written in the Quran that you have to have a stain. But this is the first time I show it after, I think, 10 years, maybe 7, when it has the right. So because of the right contact, because most of the, I mean, people who suggested to show that it was more, I didn't trust their initiatives or the reasons behind it, so I was very reluctant to show but in this case it was shown in the States, in Columbus University. It was an exhibition about portrait studies. So this is the way actually it was shown, 45 portraits. Homesick, which is the work shown here now. When the war started, in Syria in 2011, I refused always, all the years, that I do something directly about the war, because I didn't witness anything because I was living abroad, and all the news I got, as everyone probably here, through the screens or through my family who are still living in Damascus. So for me it was, I couldn't make any work actually about the war. So I decided to do a work about home, the idea of losing home. And it's not necessarily because of war, it could happen because of natural like earthquakes or fire, like happened in London a while ago. building in Damascus, where they still live now, and it's this one, the bottom left. And so I built this model with an architect. We did the project in Jordan when I was living there back then, and it took us 2 months to build the model. I asked my father to send photographs, and that was really very difficult for him because the house is actually situated right opposite the Russian embassy, but there's a very high security, and so we managed to smuggle images of the facade, and we built the model. And then I came up with the idea of destroying the model with a sledgehammer. So every time I hit the model with a sledgehammer, we took a shot. And eventually I ended up with 650 hits. And out of these stills, made the still video of the building where you see. And the idea was also because I was always in constant fear that something will happen to my parents and something will happen to the apartment. And this is basically where I grew up and until I left Damascus in 2008. So doing this, I thought that would help me to get over and break this image that it's been always on my mind to get rid of this fear. But of course, after I did this project, the house was hit, or the building was hit 4 times, and one of the times it was really badly damaged. And my parents were inside with the rest of the family. So that was quite difficult. It was not a therapy for me, but it's just, I needed to do something about the issue. So this is me when I was young. And in 2015, I wanted to do something completely different, but of course I always try to relate myself to it. I didn't want to do a work about the region, Middle East, politics. So I decided, I came up with this idea of, which actually I found it on Facebook. There's this ambulance foundation in the Netherlands, where they help people who are terminally ill and last stage of their life with the disease to help them make a wish as a last wish before they pass away, and bring them wherever they want to see within Europe, because it's all happens with ambulances, with cars. So as long as they can drive, they can bring the patient wherever they want. And this is all free of charge, and it's only for the Dutch people. But the idea now is spreading. So far they've done 7,333 wishes in this past years. So I came up with this idea to photograph the last, these places. I chose only public places because I didn't want to go into intimate, private locations. So what I did is I photographed 47 public locations in the Netherlands within the course of 1 year, where people chose these places as a last wish. So what I did is I went through the archive and I selected these places and names and dates, and I went back to these locations on the exact date and time when this happened, but 1 year or 2 years or 3 years later. So some of the places, for instance, the first one is a theater. They went to see a theater. The second one is sort of a Luna Park, but a Dutch version. And there's this Rijksmuseum the Archaeology Rijksmuseum, which is not the same Rijksmuseum. And this is a war museum, and the person, I think, repaired the MiG-21, a Russian aeroplane. So he wanted to go back and to see the plane. Swimming pool, the patient swam here on her own. And there's also they always go to the Rijksmuseum, and they only see 2 paintings, the Night Watch and the Jewish Bride. And the reason behind it is because in general, the public considers that these are the most two beautiful works by Rembrandt. So the museum allowed me to enter. I had 1 hour time to actually be alone on this floor in the museum and photograph these 2 paintings. And these are trees. There are 8 trees in one location where you can, according to your date of birth, you can relate to one of the trees. And this is a ship. It's called SS Rotterdam, which doesn't function anymore. It's a restaurant. Chapelle. This is a plane watch in Schiphol airport. And this is a replica museum of World War I. Anne Frank's house. And this is a tram. The guy worked on this specific tram in Rotterdam, and he went back because now it's displayed in a museum, open museum. So the museum allowed him to drive the tram again. This is over a bridge, crematorium. Are we okay with time? And this is one of the current projects. It's done in January 2018, and it's about a bird. It's called Northern Bald Ibis. And this is my first project. It's not photographic, it's an installation work, and it's about this bird who existed in Palmyra in the 30s. The bird is really old. It's over 5,600 years old, and it was considered as god of Thoth, the Egyptians, which is the god of wisdom and writing. And it was mentioned as a fertility messenger in the Old Testament. And in Islam also it was considered as like a guide where the pilgrimage, during the pilgrimage, they used to follow the birds because the bird used to migrate passing by Saudi Arabia. So they followed the bird during the journey. So this bird has always been existing in Palmyra until 1930s, and until in late 80s, the government confirmed the extinction of this bird. And so this is the real bird. And in 2002, the Bedouins found a colony of 7 birds nesting again in Palmyra. Nesting in Palmyra, and they informed the authorities, and the authorities thought it was a joke, so they didn't follow up. They didn't even go to check. There was this Italian anthropologist who found out about the story, and he flew all the way to Palmyra to check and to confirm. And he did, and he lived in Palmyra for 9 years to study these birds. With the help of the first Syrian lady, they built a breeding center in Palmyra to raise again, to make more chicks, and also to also for the awareness, I suppose. And so what it did is there were 7, and among these 7 there was a female who knew the migratory route from Palmyra all the way to Ethiopia, where they used to migrate wintertime twice a year. And they named this female one Zenobia, which is the name of the queen in Palmyra. So the numbers started to increase again. There were 17, and of course young, and the adult ones. And they used to travel, the journey took 6 months, and they always crossed over 7 to 8 countries during the journey. And the first station was Saudi Arabia. So the young ones, they never made it all the way to Ethiopia because it's a quite long journey, only the adults did. So during this migratory journey, the Saudis used to hunt this bird down. So within the course of the years, the numbers started to decrease again. Until in 2013, they saw the last 3 birds in the highlands of Ethiopia. And in 2014 they saw the last bird, which was the queen Zenobia. They saw her in Palmyra, and that was before, after ISIS entered Palmyra. Of course, everybody fled. They couldn't take care of her, and she also disappeared, and they lost her track because all these birds were tagged for satellite tracking. But they lost the track, and now the bird is again extinct. So what I did is I did an installation. I made a replica of the skulls of this bird with 7 skulls, which is indicates the starting of the story in 2002. I found a small. The bird is considered also the skulls itself. It's on the red list, so we cannot ship it even inside Europe from one country to another. So what I did, I found through connections, I found a small zoo in Granada, in Spain, where they had the skull, and they are kindly offered us 1 skull. So when we 3D the bird, the skull, and we made replicas of it. So this is all hand painted. And within this installation there is this aluminium plate. It was 6 millimeters. It was 230 the height and 130 the width, and it's the map of the region. It has the relief too, and we cut with the laser. We cut the migratory route. So it starts in Palmyra all the way down to Ethiopia, and then back to. But it takes different route during the migratory. So these are detailed samples. And in the installation there is also a video of 4 hours, which is the bird view of the flying birds from Palmyra all the way to Ethiopia, crossing over these countries. And this was an image that I found online, was photographed by an Italian diplomat who was living in Sirija back then. And this was the last time they seen these 2 birds flying in the skies of Palmyra. So I managed to get in touch with him, and he offered me this image, which was included also. Are we okay with time? No.
It's okay.
It's okay? This is what I'm working now. It's the most depressing project. It's called Last Scene, which is in progress now, and it's about people who were kidnapped or disappeared during war. So I'm doing this project in 5 different countries: Lebanon, Argentina, Cyprus, Northern Ireland, and Bosnia, where people disappeared, and families until today don't know what happened to these family members. So they don't know if the person is dead or alive, and they still live in this limbo of they might come back. So what I am doing is I search for these families and ask them where they remember seeing the person for the last time, and I photograph the space. So in this case, so far I've done Lebanon, and so this image, I won't tell you all but just this one. His name is Andreas Andreotti, who had Greek origins but Lebanese. 16 years old, and they he went with his friend out but never came back. And the mother lost 2 other siblings. One was hit by a mortar missile on the balcony when he was 9 years old, and the youngest one was a year and a half, who died because of bronchitis in the shelter. So this was Andreas' bedroom, but the mother, because she couldn't handle living in this space, she changed the space, and now it became the living room where they spend most of the time there. So these are other places where other families I met, and I photographed guy, for instance, he was sitting on this couch for the last time. That's how the mother remembers. This is here. He left from. They arrested him, and he just disappeared, and they never heard back from him. The house was there. The wall. They were living in the house, which was here, but the house doesn't exist anymore. Now it's a military zone, and so I photographed the wall.